Hello and good Wednesday morning to you, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Here's what's on tap for today's show. The breakdown from G-Day will continue, both the things that you like, the things that maybe Georgia still needs to work on a little bit. We'll do a lot of that today. Shocking breach of protocol in that DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sintel will be with us today. A little bit of a preview of his show tonight, Before the Hedge, is presented by Kroger, so that is going to be a lot of fun. A lot of recruiting stuff to unpack from the weekend with G-Day and everything else. Mike Griffith will be with us on Friday. We'll do more G-Day with him then. Speaking of Mike, good stuff with him from Cole Kublik from the SEC Network. We'll talk about that on today's show. We're going to try to pack a lot into the next few minutes, including some very interesting social media activity as of late. Also, a pretty big-time transfer in the air there around the SEC there, too. So we got a bunch of stuff to do. Glad to have you with us to do it. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harrah's Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I told you at the start of the week that the conversation around, what happened at G-Day, that's more than just a one-day topic. You can't unpack it all because it's obviously Georgia playing against Georgia. So you're looking on one side of the ball to see this, and you have to look on the other side of the ball to see that. Sometimes you have to spend a lot of time just kind of unpacking everything that goes down. So obviously that will be ongoing for us here over the course of this week, and it's going to continue some today. But if you don't mind, though, I want to, before we get into some of that kind of stuff, if you don't mind, I do want to begin with this, because in addition to the, hey, what happened at G-Day, the tendency to look back and see what just happened, there will always be, with DawgNation, UGA fans, and all of us, this also temptation to look ahead. What is coming next? And I've told you before that I kind of view G-Day as the unofficial end to spring. Now, the weather's not helping me out with this right now because it's not super warm today here in the state of Georgia. And then we got some cold weather coming the rest of the week here a little bit. So it's not quite summer weather yet, but I always kind of view the end of G-Day as the start of summer. And boy, I really get the impression, and Jeff Sintel's done a good job of this at DawgNation.com. By the way, Jeff's going to make a rare Wednesday appearance on the show here coming up in just a couple of minutes, so we'll do a lot more of this with Jeff in a moment. But based on some of the stuff that he's writing, based on some of the chatter in and around G-Day, some of the stuff we're seeing on social media, man, I really get the impression that this summer is going to be red hot when it comes to Georgia recruiting. Now, I say this for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's kind of the obvious take that, and Georgia's been as much of a machine as anybody can be when it comes to recruiting the last few years. But when you see the guys that Georgia currently has pledges from, plus the guys that Georgia seems to be in the mix for. Now, mathematically, it's not possible to get all of them, but when you see what's kind of out there, you really get the impression that the sky is the limit for this 2022 recruiting class for Georgia. The possibility exists that this could be as good, if not better than, any class that Kirby Smart signed at Georgia, and I say that knowing full well what some of those classes at UGA have looked like, but the potential for the 2022 class right now would seem to be off the charts, and that's a really fun thing to think about. And then sort of bigger picture, there's this. In addition to the fact that Georgia has a chance to really help itself over the course of the next few weeks as we head towards the summer, there's also just the thought that we're about to have something that feels like a very normal conversation as we move through June and have official visits and all those things taking place. There, the theme for this year, the calendar year of 2021, is getting sports back to normal, making things feel the way they once did again. And recruiting is going to be maybe our first big step in that direction with college football. We haven't gotten full stadiums yet. We're hoping to get those in the fall. We haven't gotten, a lot of things that we're kind of used to, tailgating, travel, a lot of those things. We're hoping to get that in the fall. And the next big thing to kind of feel like normal again when it comes to college football is going to be recruits taking visits, evaluations, camps, things like that. All of that may feel pretty normal as we head towards the summer, and I think that is really, really good. And if you're not quite so sure you're buying into all of this shit, if you're not quite so sure where you kind of land and how you feel about all of this, let me give you one piece of social media evidence that I think proves that. I think it's been really interesting. A lot of this has been on Instagram, some of it on Twitter. What I'm about to show you on the video screen is coming from Twitter. 5-star safety Kamari Wilson, who I talked to Jeff Sintel about a couple of weeks ago. And Jeff kind of gave us the lowdown right there. Man, he has been super active on social media as of late, talking about UGA. Now, in fairness, he also gave you like a Gig 'em Texas A&M tweet yesterday too. So it's not Georgia solely. Obviously, a lot of these guys just like kind of getting the social media attention, and who wouldn't if you had the chance to get the attention the way these guys do. But Kamari Wilson, with his Instagram stuff as of late, this cool thing on Twitter here where he shows off a boss moves graphic. And I was talking to our producer for today, Connor Riley, on the show, off the air before the show started today. And I asked him if he kind of took this to be the same thing that I take it to be. And as someone who's like a sports card geek, this is kind of really cool to me. This graphic, and y'all tell me if you feel the same way, if you're watching on video anyway. This graphic looks to me like an encased football card, which is a really, really cool thing to do. Sports cards are obviously pretty hot and have been over the course of the last year. And to see Georgia kind of maybe leaning into a couple of acronyms here for a moment, NLI, name, image, likeness, NFT, non-fungible token, to kind of get into some of these, acronyms and kind of get it, take advantage of what's hot here with Kamari Wilson, with the graphic they share with him. Wilson good enough to share with us on social media. I think that's a pretty big deal there. And when Jeff joins us here in a couple of minutes' time, we'll ask him, hey, is there anything to the fact that, on Instagram, Kamari's been saying all the things that he's saying, on the Twitter there, kind of doing a lot of the stuff that he's doing, and how does Wilson fit into what is about to be a red-hot June for Georgia when it comes to recruiting? We'll talk to Jeff Sintel about that coming up in just a moment. Now, let me kind of shift gears away from that and talk about something completely different before we get into more recruiting talk with Jeff Sintel here in just a little bit. We've had a couple of very interesting interviews on this show the last couple of days, I would say, starting with John Stinchcomb on Monday. John, obviously, former, elite All-American level offensive lineman at Georgia. He laid out some concerns that he has about the Georgia offensive line after what you saw on G-Day, after what you've heard from spring practices, and kind of where he wants to see that group work during the summer. Connor Riley, who I mentioned a moment ago, obviously doing a good job covering the Dogs for DawgNation. He was very clear yesterday about what he thinks his concerns are when it comes to this Georgia offensive line there as well. And as you might imagine, based on what we saw, red team, black team, first and second team offense, what we still want to find out, who's the starter at left tackle as a for instance on that. It was obviously a topic that Kirby Smart got into in his post-game press conference on Saturday after G-Day. There's a lot of position groups where Georgia is as deep and as loaded as any team in the country could be. Offensive line is, for now, it would seem, one of those issues in which Georgia's trying to still figure out who its starting five is going to be. And Smart was asked, how do you evaluate what's going on with that group at the end of spring? And this is the opinion that Smart shared with us on Saturday. Take a listen to this.
Well, it's all up for grabs. We'll review this tape, see how they did. Jamari didn't get to practice all spring. He had a couple of practices he had to miss, so he may have been a little rusty out there today. Tate's been in the thick of it. Tate's physical presence, toughness. He's strong in the weight room. Being guard in the SEC, you got to have a firm pocket, and you got to be able to move people. And you go against the best defensive lines every year in our conference, and you got to have some mass. You got to have some guys that can sustain heavy rushers, and we think Tate does a good job of that. Schaefer and Jamari have been splitting some reps, and then Jamari's been doubling up with Truss. But, we're not where we need to be, in the offensive line. And if we're going to be a good team, we've got to protect the quarterback, and we got to be able to run the ball. And that's one of the areas we're going to have to take some of the largest leaps to get where we want to go next season.
So that's a pretty clear statement from Smart. We're not where we need to be. Starting jobs up for grabs right now. And obviously I take what Kirby says there really seriously. But if I'm going to give you my opinion and, kind of share with you my expectation here, my assumption is still that the offensive line will be fine. Once they figure out who their five starters are going to be, whether it's Salyer at a guard, Salyer at a tackle, whatever else, my assumption is this offensive line will still probably be fine as we head towards the upcoming season. I'm more confident in saying that, as a for instance, than I am in saying Georgia will for sure have two capable cornerbacks. I'm a little less sure about that than I am about the offensive line, and I'll tell you that for one simple reason. If I were to ask you, what are the two big recipes for creating a successful position group in college football? I think you would probably say it's a combination of two things together. In a perfect world, you'd love to have measurable talent, and you would love for that measurable talent to be experienced. If you can pair experience with talent, then obviously at that point in time, you've got a pretty unbeatable combination when it comes to a position group. And when it comes to Georgia with its secondary, there's clear talent there. Keely Ringo's a 5-star. Jalen Kimber, highly rated recruit in his own right. Nyland Green, who we did not see on Saturday, highly rated recruit. There is measurable talent there in that secondary and at the cornerback position, but it's not quite experienced. So therefore you say, you've got one of the components. You don't quite have another one of the components, and you're not quite so sure how that adds up together, what you're going to get on the field. In the case of the offensive line, though, once again, if you want to just keep this to kind of simplistic terms here for a moment, you've got measurable talent. Guys like former 5-stars Amarius Mims and Broderick Jones are fighting for playing time. And you've also got experience. Justin Schaefer's played a lot of football for Georgia at this point in time. Warren McClendon, returning starter now after having kind of a freshman All-American type season a year ago. Even Erickson's played some, started a bowl game for you a couple of years ago. The offensive line is more of a spot where you can kind of pair that experience with the talent. And my guess is, like it is for a lot of position groups in college football, putting some experience with a lot of talent, the odds of you finding 5 guys who can really play, to me that seems pretty good, especially given what Smart acknowledged there, that we probably didn't see the best of Jamari Salyer on Saturday. Wasn't in the game to begin the game, moved around a little bit. Maybe been dealing with a little bit off the field there that's kept him away from spring practice, as Smart kind of alluded to there. And I don't want to oversimplify this. As Smart said, if you are going to be a great football team, given the defensive lines you're facing in the SEC, you better have that offensive line figured out. I guess my assumption is that they probably will, because the larger assumption I'm making on top of all of this is that in 2021, it's not run the football to set up the pass. It's not establish the run so the play action can work. It's, hey, come out throwing and softening up defenses, stretching them vertically. And at that point in time, you've kind of got a defense kind of softened up to the point where now you can run the football and be effective doing so. And Georgia took strides towards doing that on Saturday, once again with JT Daniels throwing it, Todd Monken calling up those plays. And I think in football, like life, everything is connected. And the work that you see in terms of the growth of the Georgia passing game, I think will eventually aid the offensive line, aid the running game, and everything that kind of goes along with that. So to kind of sum all of this up, the guests we've had on this week expressing offensive line concerns, you understand where that comes from. Kirby Smart saying that in no uncertain terms on Saturday, you understand why. This is something to pay attention to, but I don't think it's something to panic about. That there's a long summer to move through here to find 5 who are capable of playing, and with the emergence of Tate Ratledge and the versatility of Jamari Salyer to go along with everything else that's also going on there, I still think the odds are pretty good that Georgia has themselves a pretty good 5 by the time they play Clemson to open up the month of September. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thank you for being with us, and a big thanks to our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for making it all possible. Of course, Harris Cherokee Casino Resort makes it possible for us to be on video platforms like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Twitch, radio every single day at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, world-famous DawgNation.com, SoundCloud, so many different platforms for you to check us out, and really appreciate you being a part of the program today. And boy, speaking of spring heading into summer, great time to start thinking about getaways here, and there is no better getaway, short drive from Atlanta, than what my friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort can provide for you. Just 2-hour drive from the Atlanta area, whether you're talking about the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort or Harris Cherokee Valley River. Fun casino gaming experience, which so many of us love to be a part of, so much fun to be able to do, but also gourmet dining at the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort properties, luxurious shopping, a world-class spa. The Book is now open there as well. Sports gaming now taking place in the mountains of western North Carolina to go along with all the other great entertainment options. This is just a wonderful, wonderful getaway, and your chance to be a part of it. If you want to learn more about it, check out this website. It's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee, and you can find out more about these properties there, Harris Cherokee Casino Resort and Harris Cherokee Valley River. All right, before we get today's special guest appearance by Jeff Sentell, I want to go around the doghouse. Now, Mike Griffith normally joins us on Wednesdays. Mike, I believe, is going to be with us on Friday this week. But normally on Wednesdays, I do want to give a quick shout out to Mike because I thought Mike's interview, and boy, this was a long one now. Listen, sometimes I think I do some long interviews around here. Mike really went deep with the SEC Network's Cole Kubelik for his show on Monday night, which was very timely. Cole had been the sideline reporter and the analyst for the G-Day broadcast, along with his typical colleagues Jordan Rogers and Tom Hart. Cole was there at Sanford Stadium on Saturday, so we had a chance to see G-Day up close and personal. So if you want to kind of get a really good behind-the-scenes look at what Cole saw by hanging around UGA for G-Day on Saturday, this is a really good chance to do that. Good job of Mike Griffith on this interview. And as a way of kind of teasing you to get you to go listen and watch the full thing, I want to give you a little taste of Cole Kubelik talking about JT Daniels. This, to me, is really interesting. And I have to admit that a lot of what Cole says here echoes some of the assumptions that I maybe at one point in time had about JT Daniels and how much Daniels' actual persona at Georgia has confounded a lot of the things that I thought I may know about him based on the profile I had of him coming from California. This is very interesting from Cole Kubelik here on JT Daniels after Daniels had a big day on G-Day on Saturday. Take a listen to the SEC Network analyst here.
I just think that maybe most people don't really know what their understanding should be because we haven't really had a chance to get to know him. He hasn't spent a ton of time in front of the media. You know, he hasn't gone through SEC media days. He hasn't spent a ton of time in front of the camera, obviously only starting a quarter of the season at the end of the season. And I just think that people probably look at him and say, Southern California kid, obviously played at Southern California, from Southern California. You know, he's got the surfer hair and the mustache, and people probably think that he's just this West Coast weirdo. And it couldn't be further from the truth. He is not someone that is playing football because of his talent. He's playing football because of how much he loves it.
I think that's really interesting from Cole Kubelik. And as I said before, there were some assumptions that I probably had about JT Daniels before he came here. Kind of going to a fancy California high school, spending time at USC, you know, what Georgia was getting in this guy. There were probably some assumptions that I had about Daniels that have proven to be incorrect. And I'm just being as honest with you as I can be, I really like him a lot more in terms of the image that he projects for Georgia. I really like him a lot more than maybe I assumed I probably would. This is not a transactional relationship here. It doesn't seem to be anyway. This thing of, well, you bring in a hotshot quarterback in the hopes that he can get you where you want to go, and then he bolts out the program to go on to the NFL and never thinks about Georgia again. That's not what seems to be going on here. You know, Daniels has really kind of planted himself some roots, it would seem, in Athens, and he is. And we've played a lot of the audio from his press conference on Saturday. He is an incredible spokesman for this program. And, you know, when he's asked questions about other players, he goes into great detail on this. You know, he's pretty clearly, and Cole in this interview went on to talk about all the film in which Daniels has studied, going back and look at old stuff from Alex Smith and things like that as a way of bettering his game. And you really get the sense that this is not something that Daniels is just faking. He's not putting on that, you know, aw shucks persona of I love to watch game film. You know, when he's asked questions about Darnell Washington, he goes into like about a 45-second dissertation about all the ways in which he's seen Washington grow, or asked questions about Adonai Mitchell about why he was targeted so much on G-Day, and he goes into such detail both about Mitchell as a player and the kind of, you know, football philosophy that allowed, you know, Mitchell to have the ball delivered to him as much as he was. This is a guy that clearly puts a lot of thought into the game, clearly puts a lot into that. I think Georgia does well by having Daniel speak and be a vocal leader out in front of the media as much as possible. But I think the way in which Daniels talks about the game obviously aids him in the way that he plays the game. So Georgia seems to be right now as rock solid to start a season at the quarterback position as it has been under Kirby Smart, both in terms of what Daniels seems to be capable of doing on the field, his G-Day performance, really validating what he did near the end of last season, but also in terms of the way that Daniels just embraces the leadership role and the attention and spotlight that comes from being a quarterback at a place like the University of Georgia. It's not easy to do this job, but for now, Daniels really seems to be doing it well, and you don't have to just take my word for it. Cole Kubelik from the SEC Network kind of echoing some of the same stuff. All right, I'm going to get Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment, but as we wrap up around the doghouse here today, let me also remind you that that ongoing right now is the Week of Giving with our friends at the UGA Alumni Association. Now, so many of the folks who tune in, watch, or listen to this show each and every day are really proud of the great work that the University of Georgia does to serve the current generation of students and preparing to serve the next generation of students. But beyond that, the research and all of the great work being done by the staff there at UGA, really making our country and our world a better place there as well. And, of course, this is one of the big weeks we get a chance to show our gratitude for that by stepping up to support. You've seen Kirby Smart, whether it be videos on our website or across social media, calling all dogs to get involved here for the Week of Giving. And I want to let you know that we've got a few more days to take advantage of this. It runs between now and April 23rd. So if you haven't gotten in and submitted your give as a part of the Week of Giving for the UGA Alumni Association, more time for you to be able to do that. Please don't forget there's some great incentives to get involved on this. All UGA alumni who make a donation right now are going to get a 20% discount to the UGA bookstore. We're there on Saturday. The stuff that I'm wearing today, ironically, also came from the UGA bookstore there as well. So great-looking apparel. 20% discount can come your way by making a donation right now for the Week of Giving. Of course, that coupon valid through April 30th, so get involved on that. Also, everyone who donates is going to get exclusive vintage collection of UGA embroidered patches. That's a really cool thing there as well. Great collectible item, so please get involved. Website you see on your screen, but I'll read it for our podcast radio audience. It's Calling All Dogs, of course, dog spelled DAWGS, callingalldogs.uga.edu. One more time, callingalldogs.uga.edu for more information on that. There were a lot of big-time freshman performers at G-Day on Saturday. A lot of recruiting news, including the Kamari Wilson stuff that we mentioned off the top of the program. So special guest for us on Wednesday ahead of his show tonight before the Hedge is presented by Kroger. Let's talk to Jeff Sintel right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Jeff Sintel, who was between the hedges on Saturday for G-Day, and also joins us here on a different day than normal here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. But what a great day to have him on. Jeff, I said this off the top of the program that when you see all the buzz that's out there, you really get the sense it's going to be a very, very interesting, fun, engaging summer for Georgia recruiting observers with big-time visits taking place. Georgia really in the mix for as long a list of elite prospects as I can remember at any time under Kirby Smart. And I guess I'll begin with you where I began on today's show. On Instagram, on Twitter, the five-star safety Kamari Wilson has been very aggressive in kind of showing off some UGA stuff as of late. Not the only school that he's recently touted. I'll obviously acknowledge that in fairness here. But, boy, there's a lot out there about Georgia and Wilson right now. What do you make of all of that?
Yeah, Brandon, hey, good morning and happy Wednesday. I guess I would say encouraging. Those would be the words for those that are near and dear to DawgNation and those that follow your program. There's a couple of sly things to notice about this. You see, I think when he tweeted it out, it's one of those things that everybody, and also posted on his IG, got everybody wondering, like, is this a commitment, ? And then people were making those comments, and that was that lovely online chatter you like, Brandon. But then here's what I thought was sly. He drops the boss moves edit, and then all of a sudden he starts saying nice things about all the other schools he likes too. But he started that communication chain off with a Georgia centric graphic and edit. And IMG kid, Brandon, we know how those tend to work out at Georgia. 5-star safety, serious interest there from both schools. I mean, really, Kamari Wilson's name has been probably a hot topic for the 2022 class for about 4 or 5 weeks now, at least.
Yeah, it really seems to be that way, and it's kind of cool, some of the other edit stuff that Georgia's put out there lately. They don't shy away from touting the – really, I mean, Georgia's done very well at IMG Academy. If you had to pick one school to do well at, that'd be a school that you certainly would want to have some inroads when it comes to Carroll and Nolan and Warren Brinson. And, Georgia has done really well down there at IMG Academy. And, when you see some of the other stuff that other guys are, kind of sharing on social media, Georgia is clearly bragging about the fact that they feel like they've got a IMG to UGA pipeline going here.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Brandon. I think it's more than fair. I would say Georgia's batting average for an IMG kid that they really want and they roll their sleeves up for I think it's probably like 85%, especially those 5-star top 100 names where Georgia really grinds for it. I think, first of all, Brandon, it's absurd how much talent they have at that school. Case in point, there's going to be a weekend in June where I think the number is now up to just six players from IMG in town on official visits. Now stop and think for that for a second.
Yeah.
There are 6 players on that team, and probably that's why they're defending national champions finally, that are good enough in the same class to play for a college football. I guess we'd call them a super league type program, like since that's the vogue term this week, the super conference leagues that are good enough to play for Georgia, and they're all in visiting on officials on the same weekend. It's kind of staggering. I've talked to some other commitments and other targets in the 2022 class, and they really can't believe that. And like you said earlier, Brennan, that whole month of June, I'll give you a little tiny sliver of a deep, dark secret that most recruiting reporters, especially the ones that get up before 9 a.m., they feel about visits. Now, of course, visits haven't happened in forever, so that will be a treasure trove of story for the time being. But really, the simple recruiting visit story, except for maybe the one we posted this morning on DawgNation about an elite receiver, the simple recruiting visit story is a really dry piece of content. The visit goes well. There's certain things they do, unless they're handling live snakes or on scavenger hunts or on the slip and slide with Kirby and elbowing up with the head coach as everybody's spinning around. Most of these are going to go well. They're going to be excited about something. They're going to feel like family. They can't wait to get back again. But it's just going to be bonkers in June, Brandon, where nobody ever, it was almost a health deterrent. Nobody would ever want to take 5 official visits in a row or 4 official visits in a row in a month's time. But now everybody wants to do it, man. It is crazy how everybody's going to just supersize their recruiting process into 1 month because everybody's so doggone scared that it's going to be taken away from them again.
So let me ask you kind of a big picture question here for a moment. I would say that the lack of visits for the 2021 cycle changed the destination for a few recruits. As just a quick, simple example here, Alabama may have signed the greatest class of all time. Somehow I'm guessing the fact that people couldn't take visits helped Alabama there. Why not just go to the national champion, type program if you're not sure what to do? Georgia, as a for instance, went from being kind of a national recruiting program to dominating in-state. My guess is the inability to host visitors, things like that, caused Georgia to pivot a little bit too. We have players maybe at schools that they otherwise wouldn't have been in because of how weird the 2021 recruiting cycle ended up being. So now that we go over to 2022 and we're about to have visits again, and in some cases these are guys that really haven't taken a lot of visits. 2021 guys at least visit a lot of places their junior year. There's some 2022 guys that just haven't done a ton of visits as of yet. How much do you think the door that's about to be opened up for official visits, things like that, how much do you think it's going to change what eventual destinations otherwise would have been, if at all?
So there's a lot of things there, Brandon, to unpack. The first one for me is this is the immediate thing, is this is going to be a really dry season for recruiting for the next maybe month and a half or so. What I mean is nobody's going to commit now when they're so close to getting their visits, or if they do, they're still going to take their visits, so that's going to be a very dicey situation. Yeah. What you said about the 2021 class is true. I would think Georgia might even have a different set of starting corners for the Clemson game this September.
Yeah.
Had 2021 visits still been in effect, you can start thinking about painful names like Tony Grimes or maybe Terrion Arnold. I think those young men are just that good. But for me, I think a lot of kids, and this is what I've gotten feedback from parents and coaches and a lot of people about, is in 2021, a lot of people made a great choice for their decision, but perhaps it wasn't the best choice. A lot of people, like you were inferring there, they went with the brand name of Alabama. They know they'd be straight. Now everybody knows they've got a safety net underneath them in terms of the one-time transfer rule. So it was kind of risk-free signing and committing for a lot of these guys. Now in 2022, the other thing that's happening, it's not just the kids, it's the schools. I think everybody that's, aside from the amazing prospects like a Walter Nolan or Shamar Stewart, guys like that, the top 15, top 25, top 30 guys, no one really wants to take a commitment right now when they're so close to getting face-to-faces. And this is on the coach's side, the program side, when they're so close to getting those in-person evals where they can verify heights, they can verify length, they can just see what they look like and see their bodies. Nobody is really wanting to add to their classes right now when finally there's the light at the end of the tunnel where they can get some real good previous style, more comfortable style evaluations. On the same side of that coin, Brendan, is I think a lot of these schools also took players that they felt fit a profile, fit what they wanted from limited film and no evaluation. I think there was a lot of maybe 80, 85% compatibility ratings on both sides that went ahead and signed and committed and sealed the deal. That's why 2022 is going to be so crazy. I mean, these players are going to see so much in so short a time. I remember Tyler Booker laughing and talking about there's no way he's going to maintain his spelt 323-pound frame by eating all this food on all these upcoming official visits because everybody's going to pack the calories on him. I mean, it really is going to be something, and this is not just for hyperbole or anything like this. This is really something that someone in my business has never seen before when you've got this many people heading into Athens concentrated in just 1 month.
So I love the story that you wrote about the friendship that Jalen Walker, recent UGA commit, Malachi Starks, recent UGA commit, have kind of formed with each other. And Jeff, I'm sure you probably know where I'm going with this. This reminds me so much of the magnetic personalities that we've seen be catalysts for UGA recruiting classes of the past. I think about MJ Sherman a couple of cycles ago. Obviously, Richard LeCount may and forever be the gold standard for that for the 2017 class, that when you are kind of, young man that other young men want to spend time around, it just makes it a lot easier to put together elite recruiting classes. And I don't know Walker personally, but I've certainly been impressed with what I've seen from interviews from him. And the same thing is true for Malachi Starks there as well. The fact they form a bond quickly with each other, to me, suggests they're also going to be pretty good at forming bonds with the other kinds of players that Georgia fans hope to see as part of this 2022 cycle. Do you agree with that?
I do. And those two, I thought it was highly interesting how they were basically comparing notes on Georgia and Clemson in the whole month of March in the lead up to their decisions. Malachi was telling Jalen how he felt. Jalen was sharing with him what he was going through his mind. And those guys kind of both put together their decisions, or maybe some final authority, some final, really good verification on their decisions by just those chats with one another. And I think that's just only going to grow. Really quickly, one thing about that Jalen Walker story, if you guys haven't read it yet out there, is here's a quick public service announcement. It doesn't matter which school or which team you favor. If you see a big-time recruit and his family on campus, and you think for a second, would they really like it if I welcomed them and said hi and say welcome to Athens or welcome to universityville.com or whatever, or just welcome to insert your school campus name here? They really like that. Now, I'm not suggesting become IG friends and go on Facebook and take 19 selfies with them, but they really like that. It's part of the experience right now where it was so crucial because Georgia couldn't host, so you saw DawgNation hosting those guys. Jalen told me a story about he was looking in another store. I think he was trying to get some more Georgia gear, Brandon.
There you go.
Kind of all that really cool stuff that you rock on your program. But someone noticed Mama Walker, Mother Walker, Lashika Walker at Chick-fil-A, and they proceeded to say, hi, how you doing, welcome. You're that great family from North Carolina. They knew that Walker and his family were going to be in town, and Brandon, they were kind of floored by it. And I think stunned, I think taken aback in a great way. That's how they felt for their first trip into Athens town, man. For those folks out there that said, did the thought bubbles in their head and said, would the recruit like it if I just said welcome and glad to see you, glad to have you here? That was a positive for the Jalen Walker family because they really felt an outpouring of love.
Yeah, let me just say, for the recruits who were lucky enough to get tickets and be there on Saturday in kind of, unusual times where you're not able to host those visitors as of yet, I can't imagine they wouldn't have a good time. I mean, the weather was beautiful on Saturday. The downtown scene after the game, and really I think during the game there as well for a lot of folks who couldn't get in the stadium, was just, the way that you would want it to be. Perfect. I'm sure that it was. So I'm not surprised to hear they were warmly welcomed. Not surprised to hear they were having a good time. I thought the vibe and the scene around Athens on Saturday was so much fun and really 180 degrees different than some of the stuff from the season last year. It's just really great to see.
Everybody was out. Like Brandon, I don't know about you, but when I haven't been to Athens for a while, I kind of take a trip and try to hit some of the local landmarks and see what's changed. And this is an off-topic thought, but I was floored by the retail department store giant, which we will not name, that now has a location in downtown Athens. I thought that was crazy. You're driving by downtown and you see that right across from the arches. It's just more of the things that are changing for Georgia, since I think a lot of people have last been inside Sanford Stadium.
All right, let me finish with this. One of the pieces of content we always love from you is the freshman report, guys that you've covered on the recruiting trail, now getting a chance to do really some of their first action there at UGA. And obviously you've got a piece on upcoming here this week at DawgNation.com looking at some of the guys who kind of got involved G-Day on Saturday. I'll just give you the floor to kind of take this where you want to go. What did you make of those? And this is one of those weird years in which it's sort of hard to define, what a freshman even is, just given the fact that we've got extra years of eligibility and things like that. But for those first and second year players in the program who had a chance to play more than we're used to seeing them play, what did you make of what you saw on Saturday?
Yeah, Brandon, it's funny you chuckled about that. You brought a smile to my face when you did, because that's exactly some of that first part of the story. It's kind of like, what is a freshman now for dummies or something like that? Because, some folks need to go to remedial classes, and I'm sitting here needing all my fingers and toes and everything to count up all the guys that could be freshmen now. Really the way I have to look at it, Brandon, are those that have a minimum of 3 more years of eligibility left at Georgia after this season. And folks are like, okay, what does that mean? Well, that's anybody in 2021 that's new, that's signed for this season and is on campus for this season. Side road here, man, as great as Georgia looked, they still got 4 more guys with that 2021 class that still needs to show up, and including 2 guys I think will be quickly among the top 10, top 11 offensive linemen on the program, and Dylan Fairchild and Jared Wilson.
Yeah.
But then you've got all these guys, and you've got, so anybody that played in 2020, even a Jermaine Burton, he's considered a freshman because they get that bonus year. Now, nobody thinks Jermaine Burton's going to need 4 more years in Athens the way he played last fall, but the thought remains that that's all possible. What is also possible is anybody that signed in 2019 that played 4 games or less in 2019, because they still have a red shirt, then they get their bonus year, and then they could technically still be considered a freshman or a redshirt freshman because of these weird rules. I don't know whether college football as a whole will start with all those graphics that pop up in game, and they go, okay, he's a second year, or he's a third year, or he's a fourth year, and they're going to start dropping asterisk on everything. But, Brendan, I'll tell you, it was staggering when I looked at the starting lineups for the red team and the starting lineups for the black team and compared all those numbers and counted up just how many guys could be considered a freshman. Let me drop some air quotes around that for this 2021 season.
Yeah, boy, Jeff, I think that's really fun to think about. This, it's certainly daunting to try to make sense of, but there's a lot of young players in this program who have a chance to make a big mark on the program here this year. Jeff, I look forward to reading more from you about that at DawgNation.com. I know you got some great things coming on that, and of course we'll look forward to speaking to you and back in your normal spot maybe next week on a Friday. But Jeff, perfect day here today to get some recruiting info from you, just coming on the heels of a big weekend there for G-Day and everything that's coming up after that. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, Brandon, quick plug here for the story that went up this morning on Raymond Cottrell. I know how you feel about receivers, Brandon, and I wrote this, and I was like, what has happened to Georgia football? This is a top 70 overall prospect, the nation's number 12 receiver, and he says Georgia throws the ball a lot, they develop wide receivers, they score a lot of points, and he thinks Georgia is the offense now that he associates with a brand name for a big-time receiver to go to. That's what seeing J.T. Daniels, like you gushed about earlier, J.T. Daniels, Beck, Stetson Bennett, and Brock Vandegrift is going to do for that program. They're going to make that offensive attack. They're going to make that passing game look a whole lot more sporty and robust for all these name-brand receivers, the kind that usually go to Clemson and LSU and Ohio State and Alabama. Now those guys are going to put beady eyes on Georgia as well.
And just really quick here, since you brought it up, I have not had a chance to read that story yet, I'll admit it, but how big a change that is, right? I mean, what you're hearing from Cottrell right there is just such a diametrically opposed, viewpoint compared to what we've heard before, where guys like Jaden Hazelwood or Rick Gilbert would have had real skepticism about how they'd be used in the Georgia offense. I mean, in the case of Cottrell here, Jeff, that to me sounds like real substantial evidence that the brand, the image associated with UGA on that side of the ball is really evolving, and I think it's evolving in a great way here.
Brennan, I think you might drop kick Eddie the Blind Squirrel out of your studio if I ever write the story about a 5-star running back saying, I want to see the football on the ground at the University of Georgia. I think you might do that.
Hey, Jeff, great stuff. Thanks for being with us on the show here today.
All right, guys. Have a good week.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, my guess is we'll probably look at that more tomorrow because, that's what you want to see. I say this all the time, that when it comes to what's actually happening in a program, the recruits are always the first to know, because even in kind of pandemic world, they're still invited into the inner workings of a program in the way that the rest of us are just not. They get a chance to open the hood and look underneath and see what's really going on. And, a lot of us have kind of wanted Georgia to be undertaking an offensive evolution for a number of years now, but there were other recruits, you hate to sometimes bring up names of guys that chose to go elsewhere because sometimes fans don't really like that, but it is important to kind of know how he got here. There were other big-time recruits, guys who want to catch the football, who just simply didn't believe they were going to be able to do that at Georgia, and the results on the field in some of those years unfortunately kind of spoke for themselves in terms of the fact that maybe those recruits are kind of onto something, that Georgia just wasn't quite ready to do that as of yet. But when Jeff is quoting a big, prospect in the class of 2023 saying, "Nah, listen, this is a place that's getting the football delivered to these receivers now," once again, the recruits are the first to know. A lot of the media hasn't quite caught up to this yet, that maybe Georgia is going to be a high-powered passing attack, but apparently those who are invited to see the inner workings of a program, like the elite recruits of the class of 2022 and 2023, apparently they are noticing the evolution occurring. I think that's a really good thing. We've got an SEC Through coming up. We're going to get a lot of SEC news here. Let me also give a shout-out to my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia, who can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's important. It can increase the resale value of your home, possibly. It can help save you money on your energy bills because you keep that energy inside the house where you want it to go. They also offer you free, no-pressure consultation about all the installation options available to you. They're a nationally known company. That means unparalleled resources, family-owned branch right here in Georgia. That means unrivaled service. All the things you get from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You can also get great savings as well. 10% off your entire project right now, or 0% APR for 24 months. A couple easy ways to get in touch. The website, as you see it on your screen there, for those of you watching on video, PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. Or give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. So you may remember on yesterday's show, we were talking about one of the gambling guys that's kind of fairly active on Twitter, talking about the SEC teams that have the most and the least returning starters. And the team in the SEC that has the most returning starters for the upcoming year is Arkansas, according to what Brad Powers said. 19, I think, returning starters. And we referenced that Sam Pittman had gone on the Feinbaum show recently and was talking about how happy he felt, how comfortable he was with the vibe around his team as they concluded spring practice. And I kind of joined in on some of that, saying, hey, you kind of wonder, is this one of those games on the Georgia schedule that'll end up feeling a little more dangerous than it looks right now because of the experience that Arkansas brings back to go along with continuity of the coaching staff and things like that. And then you're reminded in college football of just how quickly things can change, because on the heels of some feel-good stuff related to Arkansas 24 hours ago, we now find out via Twitter that Mike Woods, deep threat wide receiver for the Hogs, has put it out there that he is now entering the transfer portal. Woods put this out on Twitter. We'll show you the tweet on the screen from him, going on to give you the kind of typical thank yous that recruits give. Based on a couple of the different messages that Woods has put out there, I certainly don't get the impression that he's somehow mad at Pittman or unhappy at Arkansas. Frankly, he's been fairly complimentary of the coaching staff there. It sounds like he just wants a different opportunity. So once again, for Arkansas, things can kind of change here pretty quick. But the other thing that you're kind of left to think about here with Woods is, we've seen almost all the conferences in college football do away with their ban on intra-conference transfers and any kind of sit out on that. The SEC is a hold out on that for right now, and you can take that down now. but the SEC is a holdout on that for the moment. But you kind of wonder, given what Woods brings to the table here. Let's look at his stats from a year ago. He played in 10 games, had 32 catches. He averaged more than 19 yards per catch, found the end zone 5 times. This is a guy that can help a team. 619 yards receiving all the way around. This is a guy who can help an SEC team. And unless you think about it, Georgia got a couple scholarships to play with here. You think, defensive back, maybe if Georgia's looking at portal stuff, that they're still maybe looking at a veteran cornerback for a certain spot. But who knows? Who knows what may happen with a guy like Mike Woods in the future here. My guess is there'll be a number of SEC teams who are at least kicking the tires on what a guy like that maybe has the ability to do, because the one thing that he does seem to do really, really well is run fast, run long, run deep, and obviously being able to blow the top off a defense like that is kind of an interesting thing to think about. I thought that Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, had an interesting statement as well, going back the last couple of days as you start to look ahead to the Grove Bowl coming up here, about the value of spring games in the SEC. And I've said this a number of times. I'm really grateful that Georgia still treats the spring game as if it matters. Some places around college football don't quite seem to do that as much anymore. And I don't know that they're important, but I think they are fun. And so I'm glad that Georgia still has one, because it gives us a chance to get together at Sanford Stadium. It gives recruits a chance to come in and see what's going on with the program. I'm glad that Georgia still treats its spring game like a big deal. And I thought Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin had an interesting statement here this week in terms of why he cares about spring games. And he said, if anything, it's a chance to see how players who've been practicing away from the watchful eye of, in most cases, fans and media, do they get nervous when you dial that up a notch? And I think that's probably a fairly accurate. I think we've even heard Kirby Smart say things like that a little bit over the time there as well, of it's just a little bit different environment. You got TV cameras there on the sideline, although admittedly probably fewer of those for the SEC network on Saturday than we're used to, but more fans in the stadium than you ever have for a scrimmage or anything like that. And there's just that opportunity for that extra little butterfly to kind of pop up in your stomach or anything related to that. And Lane Kiffin says that's what he thinks that spring games, the value they provide. And I'm guessing for Georgia, it's very much the same thing. Either way, it's the kind of thing that I'm glad to see certain schools in the SEC working hard to preserve, Georgia being one of them, will make that your SEC through. And I'll also tell you this. For more SEC talk this afternoon, please don't forget to tune in on the SEC Country video channels, whether it's SEC Country on Facebook, SEC Country Live on YouTube. We'll do SEC Country Live this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So many of you have been so nice in kind of celebrating that show's return and being a part of that with us. I really appreciate all of you who have chosen to do that. It's been a lot of fun talking SEC, more than just Georgia, although we do talk some Georgia each and every day there. But more than just Georgia, talking about everything going down with the SEC. That's been a really fun thing to be able to do. So I'll see you at 3 p.m. this afternoon for SEC Country Live on the SEC Country video channels. Looking forward to being able to do that with you. What's not quite as much fun, but sometimes you have to do, is address a little bad news for UGA athletics. This was breaking just as we were kind of coming on the air yesterday morning. Severe Wheeler, Georgia point guard, has decided to do a couple of things here: enter the NBA draft, but also put his name in the transfer portal. I think the assumption is that Wheeler will not get drafted, so it's looking like he's going to be playing his college ball here somewhere else next season. And I just got to tell you, I just don't quite know what to do with this. I'm not trying to sidestep the opinion here. I'm going to let people more educated on the subject than me kind of weigh in on this. I mentioned this on the radio this morning when I was on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. I can't quite tell if the glut of players leaving Georgia, and really the biggest names in the team, the Severe Wheelers and the KD Johnsons and the Tamani Kamaras, I can't tell if this is a problem that's specific with UGA, unique to the circumstances that are happening in Athens, or if a lot of this is related to the, I think, really unfortunate trend across the sport. We're heading towards a total of upwards of 2,000 names in the basketball transfer portal. I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's bad for the sport. And as I've told you before, I think it's actually bad for the players in the sport, because I think that kind of instability in their own college lives is not going to end up being a good thing for them. And, I think that it probably threatens the next generation of players who kind of want to take advantage of that NCAA Division I basketball opportunity. And all this movement, I think, kind of calls some of the stability of the sport into question. But you're obviously, kind of left to wonder, is Georgia creating the kind of environment, the atmosphere that guys like this feel like they can thrive? And I just don't quite know the answer to it. I will say, though, I know it's very disappointing for Dog fans that you learn who these guys are, you grow to appreciate aspects of their game, and now they're gone. That's disappointing, especially after Georgia just had a pretty nice collection of guys that added from the transfer portal, and you start thinking about how do those pieces pair with what Georgia already has, and you find out a guy like Wheeler, who was pretty clearly the nucleus of Georgia's team, expected to be for the upcoming season, that he's now leaving as well. I certainly understand why UGA fans are disappointed about this. I'm just not really quite sure what the answer to that's supposed to be. On a much happier note, at least in game one of the doubleheader, we will celebrate the Georgia women's softball team. In fact, here as part of our Gator Hater roll call, we'll make the UGA softball team our golden shoe winner for today for a very, very impressive win against Oklahoma last night in game one of their doubleheader. Game goes 9 innings. The Dogs get the 7-6 win here. Jaden Fields was a big factor in that, including driving in the winning run there. Oklahoma came in with a 40-game winning streak. So the program that also holds the nation's longest winning streak in football had a 40-game winning streak in softball last night. Georgia got the win there. Did not win game 2 of the doubleheader, but really a very impressive showing there in game 1. We'll make the softball team the golden shoe winner for today. Diamond Dogs also got a win last night against Clemson in extra innings. That was a lot of fun to be able to do. So a lot going on with UGA athletics right now. And by the way, speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, Gator Hater countdown, Dogs back in Jacksonville, 192 days from right now, getting some revenge against those lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Appreciate you being with us and having a good time here today. We got a little time for your comments here today. We'll run through some of these pretty quick here and then get into some fun stuff after that. So let's see if we can get going. We'll do YouTube first. We'll do Facebook after that. And we'll just be rocking and rolling here. All right, let's see what else. Jay Shipes weighing in on some of the I don't even know what some of these comments are. That guy also mentioning there was kind of a weird moment in the game last night. Jaden Fields did drive in the winning run, but prior to that, she'd hit a home run and did not touch home plate. And talk about, I mean, what an odd set of circumstances that was, but certainly retribution for Fields after that and driving in the winning run. So yeah, there was kind of that weird moment in that game. Frank Patterson says, when you guys sell off to ESPN, promise that you won't remove Eddie from the desk. Listen, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase may have said that every man has his price, but first of all, we don't plan on being sold off to ESPN or anybody else anytime soon. But you better believe that Eddie's going to be going with me wherever we go at that point in time, for sure. Mike D. also reminding us the UGA tennis and golf kick off SEC championships today. Mike, thanks for the reminder on that. Robert Barnes says, what concerns me is that we can't recruit in our state for basketball. Look at all the talent we have here. Yeah, and that's been certainly Robert talked about that, that Atlanta area is a hotbed for so many people when it comes to basketball recruiting. Bruce Pearl's essentially made the entirety of his career almost built around how well he can recruit the Atlanta area, and Georgia has had a harder time doing that. I sort of get the impression that a lot of those Atlanta kids don't necessarily have any kind of emotional tie to UGA. Many times, like a lot of Atlantans, they are from somewhere else, and so therefore Georgia doesn't mean a ton to them. But yeah, Georgia just has not really swam in those deepest, recruiting waters in the Atlanta area. That's probably fair to say. For a while, I think that, Georgia just kind of wanted to steer clear of the AAU scene all the way around. They wanted to, as the meme on social media the other day, they wanted to win the right way, as so many of these coaches like to say. But, obviously there's a lot of guys who, have from the Atlanta area chosen to go elsewhere. Let's see what else. Fred McMillan, thank you for the kind words. Matthew McGahee kind of also talking about some of the recruiting challenges that Georgia basketball faces. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the inverse of what you see in football. Georgia in football can lean on its history and its tradition and the resources that are just more easily marshaled because of that history and tradition. Georgia basketball just faces a stiffer challenge in that regard that, you don't have. I mean, I can almost name all of the tournament appearances for UGA on one hand. I mean, certainly off the top of my head, we could rattle through very quickly the entirety of Georgia's history in the NCAA basketball tournament. And in terms of, players that former players that these players know, that would be, potentially galvanizing forces that would drive people to UGA, Georgia just does not have a lot of that. And I think all of us are kind of aware of that the job of being a Georgia basketball coach is difficult. Now, you would say, well, on the one hand, it's also UGA and the SEC. There's no reason why you can't win, and that's true. But there are a lot of reasons, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat or make it, make excuses or anything like that. I'm just being honest. There are a lot of reasons why men's basketball at Georgia is just a more difficult job than maybe its counterpart sport would be in other places across the campus, because when you've just kind of done one thing for a very long time, the gravitational pull is for that same level of success to continue occurring. Great programs have a tendency to stay great. Teams that are not quite great have a tendency to kind of exist below that level. You have to really do some things to kind of change all of that. And obviously right now that's happening a little slower than Georgia fans would like for it to. Terry asks, did George Pickens have a successful surgery? Well, I don't have any kind of inside information on his surgery, but I will say that I showed you the video on Monday that I had captured of Pickens and Jermaine Burton walking into the stadium together before G-Day on Saturday, and Pickens was all smiles. He was walking with a limp, but he was not using crutches or anything like that, and I took some liberties, not a medical expert, but I took some liberties of saying that, to me, this does not look like a guy that's more than a year away from playing his next football game. Now, obviously, I would suggest that you don't take me very seriously on that, because I'm not a doctor, nor do I have any kind of medical insight on Pickens whatsoever. But I left Saturday actually feeling a little bit better about the state of the injured Georgia wide receivers. Jermaine Burton's a guy we know that's coming back eventually. And, someone like Marcus Rosemary-Jackson, Kirby Smart said something very hopeful about the other day, that he's getting close. And frankly, to see George Pickens with my own eyes on Saturday, I got to tell you, he didn't look so bad with what I saw from him there either. Over on Facebook here for a moment. Shelton Tucker ranking his top programs in college football. Sam Burke's asking about Branson Robinson. I saw the video that Robinson put out the other day, or not, I guess he put it out, but it was somebody else taking it, of him doing the deadlift. I mean, you're talking about a guy that just he looks like he ought to be playing running back at Georgia. I'll tell you that much right now. Rhodey Williams asking about the kicker from Texas, Jared Zirkle. Kirby Smart did say after the game on Saturday that Zirkle's been dealing with a little bit of an injury situation there. Reggie Walker says, food for thought. If we win both Clemson and Florida, we automatically go to the college football playoff, even if we lose the SEC championship game. And I do think there is an interesting argument to be had related to that. That the Clemson game, I've always said, means more for Georgia than in some cases folks are, saying that it does. Some folks have said, well, Georgia could still lose that game and make the college football playoff, and that's true. But by winning against Clemson, if we assume that Clemson goes on to have a typical Clemson season after that, I think that Georgia, as Reggie suggests, does buy itself some insurance policy of, can Georgia then make a case as a second SEC team into the playoff? Because here's what would be really frustrating. If Georgia beats Clemson, then runs through the SEC schedule, but loses close to a team like Alabama in the title game and ends up going 12-1, and Clemson loses to Georgia, but then kind of cakewalks through the rest of the ACC and goes 12-1. If they put ACC champion Clemson in the playoff over a 12-1 SEC runner-up in Georgia, I mean, at a certain point in time, I just don't know how you just sit there and take that. I mean, at a certain point in time, you just kind of lose your cool in relationship to that. So I do think, and I'm not conceding the SEC title game in any way, but I do think the Clemson game could end up being a pretty interesting insurance policy for a school like Georgia as what happens if you are SEC runner-up, maybe adding to the cachet of that to maybe, belong in the college football playoff. Matt Rukavina says, I've missed a lot of Bama fans in the Facebook comment section. Well, I hate that I've missed that. Brian K. Whitehead wants to see some Dog Nation props on the SEC country desk. Yeah, you never know what we might do for something like that. That's a good idea. A couple more on Facebook here. Jermaine King says when talking about basketball recruiting, when schools like Duke or UNC or UConn come calling, it'd be crazy for guys not to leave for those schools. And that ends up being one of the issues here is that those big, huge, basketball brands, and some of these brands just carry a lot of weight, a lot of cachet. It is very hard to recruit against that. The same way it's hard for those same schools to recruit against Georgian football, the inverse of that in basketball can be a really big thing. Randy Hall says, did I see Bear Alexander on Saturday? I never really saw him on Saturday, although I would certainly have loved to. I can only imagine how big he must look, and I'm certainly glad he got a chance to visit for G-Day. Bill Sanders says the answer is simple, just win your conference and you're in the playoff, and Bill's right about that. And as I said before, we're not going to concede anything related to the SEC championship. But this is one of those things that impacts a school like Georgia more than other places. This is, I think, one of the fundamental unfairnesses of the college football playoff system, in that all conferences are not treated equally, but conference champions are typically treated relatively equal by the selection committee, and that is the kind of thing that's it is frustrating. And you saw Alabama get the benefit of the doubt in 2017. You kind of understand why they would, given their previous history of national championships. Georgia did not get the same benefit of the doubt in, say, 2018. The argument wasn't clean and clear in favor of Georgia, but you had someone like, say, Kirk Herbstreit that year who went on ESPN and emphatically said that he thought Georgia was one of the 4 best teams in the country. But it seems like that argument was a non-starter for the playoff committee in comparison to teams like Notre Dame as a non-conference at large, as Oklahoma, a Big 12 champion. It just doesn't seem like Georgia got much in the way of real consideration from the committee that year. And as long as you're playing in a conference as deep as the SEC is, you're going to leave out, have the potential of leaving out one of the 4 best teams in the country if you're not willing to consider more than one SEC team. And here's where this becomes kind of a hot button issue for me. People say the playoff isn't good because the semifinal games haven't been very competitive. But I would argue the reason why the semifinal games haven't been very competitive a little bit over the last few years is not because the playoff is somehow deficient. I would say that the committee isn't selecting the true 4 best teams. It's one of the reasons why I'm in favor of an 8-team playoff. I believe if you had an 8-team playoff that included more at-large teams, including another additional team from the SEC each and every year, you may see blowouts in the quarterfinal round. But when you get to the semifinal round, the 4-team playoff as it exists right now, when you have more at-large teams considered, I think the semifinal games are therefore going to be a lot better because you're going to have teams that actually earn their way there and not just the kind of paper tiger teams that oftentimes emerge because they are conference champions. I'm back on YouTube for a minute. Then we're going to bounce around here on both comment sections and we're going to leave. Thomas Tyson weighing in on somebody there. Robert Barnes says, I'm afraid they'll do everything they can to keep 2 SEC teams out of the playoff, and I think that's absolutely what they do. And it's not because they hate Georgia or hate the SEC. They want college football to be a national sport. There's a huge push for that. And it's really hard to do so. There was one of the big national writers of the day was talking about the challenges that kind of face the Pac-12 right now. I mean, college football is only just barely a national sport. Pretty much west of the Mississippi, at the very least west of the Colorado River, maybe not quite west of the Mississippi, but west of the Colorado River, you just are struggling to find a handful of teams that really want to do it at the highest elite level. You just are. It's hard to make this a national sport, but college football believes that it's bigger and better business to be a national sport. And they also, I think, understand and I hate to bring the P word into this, but they understand the politics. I don't mean election politics. I mean the kind of backroom politics of you had to get and twist the arm of the Pac-12 to even go along with the playoff when it was first formed ahead of the 2014 season. If these conferences and these sections of the country believe they're not competing for the national championship, they won't be in favor of maintaining the playoff. They were more than happy just to keep going to the Rose Bowl each and every year. They didn't care about a national championship. You had to convince them to even be a part of it. And so, in addition to what they view as bigger and better business when you've got the entire country tuning in for these games, there's also the backroom politics of convincing Group of 5 conferences and Pac-12 type conferences that they should even support a playoff going forward, because it was not a no-brainer for a lot of these leagues. They would even be involved in this. All right, here we're going to get ready to go. Thomas Van Santa, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Thomas Dyson says if we don't lose any games, we don't have to worry about committee politics. That's obviously true. What else? So I see people talking about, did Tennille Calvino really move from Facebook to YouTube? Or is that fake news? I've seen some chatter about this, but I can't tell if that's fake news or not. All right, let's see what else. Scott Green says, why is the press in Clemson thinking it's a slam dunk for the Kittens to beat the Dogs? I watched their spring game and I'm puzzled. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, here's the thing you got to understand, is that Georgia fandom, not just the website DawgNation, but DawgNation in general, is massive. It is a huge fan base, and because it's such a passionate fan base, it's fairly easy to get it riled up. There are always going to be, hucksters and charlatans and, grifters who are kind of showing up to try to take advantage of the just sort of natural energy that Georgia fans have. And I guess there has been some attention paid to a Clemson deal related to that. I said this on the radio this morning when I was on 960 The Rep. You don't have to swing at every pitch when it comes to stuff like this, though. And you may notice on this show that we haven't made much mention of anything like that because I said this during our conversation yesterday, that I don't really care what media person without much of a following says about anything. And I don't mean that to be elitist, but I'm just saying that from the practical standpoint. If you don't have much of a following, you really have nothing to risk by being wrong. If Cole Kubelik, who we played some audio from today, if he says something, we're going to pay more attention to that because Cole's got a following. If he says something dumb, then he puts that reputation at risk at least a little bit. So therefore the things that he says just carry a little extra weight. So I know some Georgia fans have kind of given some attention to something that was said by, some Clemson blogger or whatever else. I'm honestly not even really sure of the substance of it, nor do I really have much of an idea of who it was that said it. I just know that it's kind of out there because I've had a lot of folks bring it up to me, but I guess I don't take it too seriously, Scott, if you know what I'm saying. TJ Smith says I dumped Facebook entirely, and this is where I landed. Frank Patterson. I'm not reading that comment, but that's funny. Zach Cannon says, do you have any new thoughts or prognostications concerning name, image, and likeness stuff, like Consequence or even things like Vandy's wallet? So I guess I don't really. I mean, here's what I think. Based on the way that I think it's going to work right now, I think this is going to be a little bit like the cost of attendance additions that were made a few years ago, where it was kind of thought to be a big deal when it was first instituted. It ended up kind of not being a big deal. The one thing I don't get the impression we're about to do is have like the Wild West where, everybody's just out there cutting their own deals and making all their own money and, doing their, skincare, influencer endorsements on Instagram and TikTok. I sort of get the impression that we're not quite heading for that kind of Wild West scenario. Maybe we should. I sort of get the impression it's going to be something less than that and something that we're probably a little bit more easily able to get used to in the few years to come. If you go back and listen to, and we're going to get ready to wrap up here, but if you go back and listen to DawgNation Dailies from say 2016, early 2017, if you played the audio of those shows compared to some of the stuff that you've heard me say recently on this, you would hear huge hypocrisy. I've really almost completely changed my mind about this. I was very open to, I guess you call it laissez-faire. Hey, just let people do what they want to do. Don't restrict their ability to make money. I was very, very open to almost no rules related to any of this stuff as recently as a few years ago. And if you really search hard enough, you could find examples of that. I have now kind of gone almost 180 degrees of the direction, kind of locked down, kind of more hard line on the amateur system as the way that it's been in the past. I do think is the best thing for college sports. And I'll give you one brief reason as to why. When you watch the way that the transfer portal works, I think it gives rise to the truth about what the actual economy around college sports is. It's not that it's harder for teams to find players. What's actually true is it's harder for players to find a team. There are more people in both football and men's basketball. There are more players in the transfer portal than there are spots to put them. That's because the roster spots themselves are still incredibly scarce. That's the actual economy around college sports, no matter what, social media may tell you about that. And I just think it's important to note that there are thousands and thousands of high school athletes who absolutely are in line and hoping to be selected to be a part of a system that a few people on social media would tell you was exploitative. I don't think the actual economy around the sports actually works that way. Otherwise, it'd be harder to find players than it is to fill rosters, and it's just not that way. So that's kind of my deal on that. But honestly, I think the kind of watered down version of name, image, and likeness that I believe it's on its way will probably end up not being that big of a deal, but it's the push year after year after year for more and more and more radical change. It's that continued insatiable appetite on the parts of some people to just change everything about college sports. That's the thing I believe that ultimately threatens the sport, but I realize that not everybody agrees with me on that. All right, very last comments over here on Facebook. Daniel Aldrich talking about the transfer portal being kind of a honey hole for Dan Mullen, which is kind of interesting that he's been very outspoken against it as of late, which obviously feels like rank hypocrisy given the fact that he's benefited from it so much. But Mullen has definitely talked it up as of late, not liking some of that, even though it seems like that's what half his roster came from. All right. Anything else before we leave? Brian Jones says, any word on MJ Sherman? A lot of those linebackers dealt with those shoulder injuries during spring. So hopefully over the course of the summer, and we probably won't get much official word on this. So there'll be rumors and things like that. Maybe some video, photograph evidence of these guys, working out and doing good things again. But it'll probably take us, to August or late July to kind of find out how healthy a lot of these linebackers are coming back from some of this kind of stuff, because they've had a lot of issues over there with some of that. But I don't have any reason to believe that any of those guys, Sherman, Dean, or any of the rest, aren't heading back for something positive before it's all said and done. Daniel Aldrich, glad you had a good time at G-Day. That's good to hear. All right, we're going to get ready to go. Y'all make sure that you check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. There's a lot going on right now, whether it be Falcons heading for the draft, Braves dropping a game, Yankee Stadium last night. Just really a lot to keep up with in terms of everything that's going on with your Atlanta news now. You can follow all that online, ajc.com, as far as what else going on, some interesting developments over Gwinnett Place Mall, kind of a regional study taking place there. That's kind of interesting. Also, the Soccer Super League, you may have heard about it. Sounds like that's not going to happen now. You can read more about that online at ajc.com. And a really good new barbecue restaurant just opened up in a beautiful part of our city, Grant Park. You want to read about that? Atlanta News Now with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Make sure you check that out here today. We will be back tomorrow, 10 a.m., for our R.S. Andrews cool down after the show. Of course, find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Air conditioning units, get that thing tuned up, ready to go for the spring that's on its way. And also DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. You have a great day, everybody. I'll look forward to seeing you then tomorrow. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.